Welcome to the Faith Builder series, week 4. Imagine for a moment that you're separated from people that you love and you just long to be able to be back together again. It's not too difficult to imagine at the moment because we don't even really need to imagine it at all. We're living the reality. This week, both practices that I want to speak about involve giving something up rather than adding more to our lives. Jesus said to his followers, when you pray, in Matthew 6 verse 5. But he also said just a little bit later on in verse 16, when you fast. So his expectation was that his followers would both pray and fast. And so the first practice that I want to talk about this week is about fasting. To fast means to stop doing something for a period of time. And the reason for stopping is because it expresses a greater hunger or a deeper hunger for something else. There are so many things that we've already been forced to give up during this season. Contact with people that we love, birthday parties for children and young people, or other celebrations that it looks as if we're going to have to give up our plans even for our summer holidays. I've experienced a number of couples being sad or in some cases actually devastated because their wedding plans are completely up in the air. They've had to postpone or cancel something that they've been planning for quite some time because of the lockdown. I've met a number of couples for whom planning has been complicated and quite difficult because they live away from where they're going to get married, or their jobs have meant that they're separated and they're living and working in different parts of the country or even in different countries. And so what with those couples I've found is that they would have very intentional times whenever they're both in the same place at the same time, and they are very focused on the plans that are needing to be made for the wedding. It's a very intentional focus. This journey of fasting is a journey that enables us to recognize what we love most. And it's also an intentional focusing of our hearts and our minds and our souls. Jesus talked about fasting. He taught that it was important to do, but it actually caused a little bit of confusion, a bit like the messaging that we're seeing on TV at the moment, because some of the disciples of John the Baptist came to him and they challenged the behavior of his own disciples because while John's disciples were fasting, Jesus' disciples were feasting. And Jesus' reply was that it's appropriate to feast whenever the bridegroom is with them. But there was going to be a time coming when the bridegroom wouldn't be present, and at that point it would be appropriate to fast. So part of why we fast is because we're longing for the bridegroom, Jesus, to come back. Because when he's manifestly present, everything is so much better. His coming back is whenever he comes in glory. That's the thing that we're most looking forward to because that's when the wedding will take place. However, there are times in history when people recognize things are really bad and they cry out to God to come and to be manifestly present with them. And that's more like couples who gather for a period of time to intentionally focus on plans and preparations for something that will yet be to come. And so at the moment, what there has been a cry from the people of God in Ireland over a number of weeks now to gather together to pray and to fast. And that's coming from people who have spent many years praying and fasting and seeking the Lord's will. And it comes out of a sense that we need to have the manifest presence of God in our midst. And so one of the reasons that I'm giving you this practice this week is to tie in with what's already been happening through Transformations Ireland and 24/7 prayer, the Presbyterian, the different denominations, our own denomination, the Presbyterian Church in Ireland, amongst others. The most common form of fasting has always been a fasting from food, or in even more extreme cases, people have fasted from both food and fluid, water. But if you do that sort of a fast, it needs to be an extreme circumstance, and it needs to be for not more than 3 days. The issue is not food per se. Anything and anything can be a substitute for God. John Piper, who wrote this book that I found very helpful, A Hunger for God, describes that we can easily deceive ourselves that we love God unless our love is frequently put to the test, and we must show our preferences not merely with words, but with sacrifice. And he goes on to say, do I really hunger for God? Do I miss him? Do I long for him? Or have I become content with the gifts that I've received from him? Am I settling for the way things are and just accepting this is it? Christian fasting is a test to see what desires control us. Richard Foster, in The Celebration of Discipline, which is a classic in this area, says that more than any other discipline, fasting reveals the things that control us. The more deeply you walk with Jesus, the more hungry you get for more of him, the more homesick for heaven, the more you want the fullness of God in your life, the more that you want to be done with sin for good, the more you want the bridegroom to come again, the more you want the church to be revived and the beauty and fragrance of Jesus to be evident in its life, the more you want to see transformation in our communities. That's one of the things at the heart behind the call to prayer that has come from our denominations and Transformations Ireland and the 24/7 prayer movement. There's a recognition of the state of health of our nation and the recognition of serious need for healing that's way beyond dealing with coronavirus. And so the call to pray and to fast is one of urgency, and it's one where we want to have revealed to us the things that control us, the things that have a grip on our lives. And so the learning to fast and developing that as a practice, it's about doing less, but with the purpose of discovering more about what God wants to reveal in us and through us, and that he would be more manifestly present than he currently is. So how do we go about it? Well, the first thing to say is if you've never fasted before, walk before you try to run. I've been really encouraged by a series of videos that have been put on by our young people on their Facebook page, and it's been various ways that they've been engaging with God and discovering God speaking to them during this lockdown period. And one young man felt the Lord saying to him, I want you to help your mum to get fit. And so he started with walking before running, to start very simply, to ease her in. And so what they've done is they've started jogging in their garden, and they started by doing a few hundred meters and then stopping. And each day they're adding more meters. And so it's a really sensible and helpful picture of how we go about fasting. If you've never fasted before, rather than jump right in with a full 24-hour fast or longer, I would encourage you to fast from one meal per day for a week, and just to ease your way in. The other thing that you might choose to do is to do what Daniel did recorded in Daniel whenever they were taken into exile. Whenever he was being offered all these wonderful foods and rich foods and wines and things, he said, no, give us vegetables and water. Keep it simple and see how God will bless us as we remain faithful to him. And that's exactly what happened. So start slow, build it up gradually. So if you've tried one meal being missed per day for a week, then try a 24-hour period once a week whenever you would go without food completely. As you prepare to do that, look at your diary, find a day that would work best for you. This is a learning exercise. This is about practicing and learning how to fast. And so don't make it more difficult on yourself than it needs to be. Don't choose a day that's really hectic and where there's a lot of stuff going on, where you'll struggle if you're not having some food initially. So try to choose something that will make it easier for you. And also what I would recommend is that you start after having had an evening meal. It's the easiest way to do a 24-hour fast is have your evening meal and then you don't eat until evening meal the next day. And so the thinking behind that is that your stomach is full, then you go to sleep, you're sleeping for your normal nighttime sleep. And so effectively 12 hours of your fast have gone by before you've really even started into your day's activities. And so that's an easier way to practice a 24-hour fast. I would encourage you, if you've got underlying medical issues, to talk to your GP to check that it's an okay thing to do. What you're wanting to do as you're doing it is you want to pay attention to what's happening, your attitudes. You want to recognize the mindset that is developing within you. Sometimes you become more grumpy because what you're doing is you're denying your body things that it normally would have. And so you find that those appetites are starting to scream out. And so, for example, if you're fasting from food, you'll feel hunger pangs, and that'll cause some discomfort. Now, it's important to remember that's not real hunger. It's just your stomach going, hold on a minute, I'm used to getting food at this time of the day. I'm hungry, feed me. It's not actually hungry and you don't need to feed it. And so resist those hunger pangs. And rather than remember why you're doing it. And it might be helpful to listen to worship songs or to spend some time reading or praying, something that takes your mind off the pangs that you're feeling. Because soon the pangs will pass. Although your body initially experiences discomfort, a lot of that discomfort is because either it's used to feeding at certain times, or actually the body is also getting rid of toxins that are in it that have built up over many years of bad habits in our eating. And encourage you to press into God and worship during this 24-hour period or whatever period fast that you might have. Be wise. Be conscious of the fact that if you're eating less, your body is not going to have the same level of energy, and so don't take on very strenuous activities whenever it's unnecessary to do so. That's a really important thing to do. Fasting is something that Jesus has instructed and expected us to do. It's a way that we recognize that there are so many other things that we've allowed to control us before Jesus, and so we want to encourage you to practice giving up food. It might be that you choose not to give up food, but to give up social media or entertainment. But actually, food is the most challenging one, I think. The second spiritual practice that I want you to think about starting this week is another one that involves giving up something. This time it's giving up constant availability to other people. It's the practice of silence and solitude. It's the practice of actually, rather than other people demanding your time or controlling your time, allowing your time to be controlled by God. That you take a moment in the day for silence and solitude, and you allow that moment to build over time so that you cultivate a period each day when you're able to listen to God. Part of it for me is actually part of my practice of examination at the end of the day, the examen, that I just allow stillness and become conscious of God's presence. But it's better if you do it at a different time of the day, and I'm going to seek to do that as well. Jesus provides a couple of good examples for us. One is in himself. Early in his ministry, in Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, verse 42, what you discover is after a long day of ministry, healing the sick, casting out demons, he gets up at daybreak and he goes and finds a solitary place. His disciples are still asleep because they have to go looking for him afterwards. And he does that because he recognizes the value of cultivating a relationship with his Father and listening to what his Father has to say to him, because he's guided in what he does and what he says by what his Father wants. And so every day, early in the day, Jesus will look to find us a solitary place in order to be still with his Father. The other thing that we see in the life of Jesus is an example when he was at the house of Mary and Martha. And Martha was so busy doing so many things that were legitimate things that needed done. But Mary chose to sit at Jesus' feet. And when Martha was giving off, Jesus said, Mary has chosen the wiser thing. She chose to sit in stillness and listen. It wasn't solitude, because there were lots of other people there, but she chose to listen. And this is the heart of what this practice is about. It's about choosing to listen to God and create an environment where you can do that well. So discipline yourself not to always have to be saying something or doing something or responding to someone. If you're starting out just like the practice of fasting, what I would suggest is that you take just 5 minutes each day, that you find a space where you are less likely to be interrupted, where you can have silence and solitude. That might be that you go to your bedroom and that you close the door. It might be that you have a space in the garden that you're not going to be interrupted, or there's a walk that you can go on a short distance where other people are not likely to be. Just find a space where you're less likely to be interrupted, or let other people know that you're going to be doing this and you don't want to be interrupted. And so take that 5 minutes, settle yourself. It's good if it's a particular place, same place each time, because then it becomes familiar, like so many other things. Becoming more aware of God's presence. What will happen over time is that you'll recognize his voice more clearly. You'll also recognize the way he speaks to you because of who you are and your personality and your circumstances. But initially, what you can expect is that you'll either experience an emptiness that will feel uncomfortable, or more likely that the space will be filled with the noise of what's going on in your mind and in your emotions. And so the practice starts with actually just allowing yourself to start to recognize that, and to allow your mind and your spirit and your emotion to be stilled, so that that's less distracting and you're able to focus more on listening to what God has to say. Some people, John Stott used to talk about it taking 20 minutes before he would go into his Bible study devotion, because it took him 20 minutes to still himself. And he would have a notebook beside him, and he would jot down something that came into his mind that was distracting him, so that he was able to forget about it and to focus in on being still. And so the idea is that we seek to cultivate a stillness so that we can listen to his voice. Over time, then, what I encourage you to do is to lengthen from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, etc., just the way you did with some of the other practices that we've been talking about, so that it's not overwhelming at the beginning, but it becomes a regular rhythm to your life. We can't really do it at the moment because of lockdown, but it's a really good thing to take a day that is a quiet day, where you can go somewhere where you know that you're not going to be interrupted, where you can have stillness and silence and solitude as part of that day. So that's the last practice for this week, silence and solitude. And so that, alongside fasting, are things that you can do by removing other things from your life, and it creates space. It also shows a desire not to be controlled by the things that you're giving up, but actually to allow God to control you. One of the biggest hindrances to cultivating silence and solitude is actually the very device that I'm using to record these faith builders, and that's our mobile phones. Our mobile phones can be wonderful, or they can be a huge distraction, and it all depends on how we use them. And so what I would encourage you to do is to be honest with yourself about your mobile phone. If you cannot leave it down and you cannot let it ping without needing to respond, then what I would encourage you to do is to actually switch it off or put it on airplane mode and leave it somewhere else while you're engaging in silence and solitude. If it's not such a big deal, then it's sufficient to put it on silence or to put it on airplane mode so that you'll not be distracted by some message pinging on your phone in the middle of your devotional time. If you're somebody who first thing in the morning, the first thing you do is scroll down through the things that you've received on your phone, or last thing at night, I would encourage you to leave your phone somewhere else and to buy an old-fashioned alarm clock or pull one out of storage wherever it is and use that to waken you up in the morning rather than your phone, because it's about how we control it rather than it controlling us. My phone's not a big deal to me. I don't always respond immediately, and so I actually use my phone as my alarm clock. I use my phone for the Lectio 365 devotional. I even use an alarm on it whenever I'm engaging in my devotional practices so that I don't overextend time with God if I've got something else that I'm meant to be heading off to. But our phones are huge potential or huge distraction, and so it's being honest about the phone and what that is for us. And for some people, actually, the harder practice in terms of fasting would be to fast from their social media and mobile phone for a few hours in the day. The final thing I wanted to do was to encourage you to switch from reflecting on Psalm 23, if that's what you've been doing for the last few weeks, and to use instead the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that Jesus taught his followers to pray. And you can find it in Matthew 6, verses 9 to 13, or Luke chapter 11, verses 2 to 4. I would recommend the Luke 11 version. They're very similar, but I would recommend it because I've also recommended the Lectio 365 app. And it's interesting that they have started this week a 5-week series using Pete Greig's book, How to Pray, as the basis for their devotional. They're teaching people to go deeper in prayer as we take this 5-week journey towards Pentecost. And so I would encourage you, as I've done before, to use the Lectio 365. I know many folk from First Bangor used the book in their discipleship groups last autumn, but one of the things that I sensed out of that practice of using the book and of learning to pray was that it didn't have the impact that I hoped it would have, or that a lot of people desired. In fact, we haven't seen huge evidence of a deeper prayer life that has come in light of it. And so one of the things that I suspect and sense in the Lord is that our changed circumstances will cause our approach to prayer to deepen, and we'll have a fresh perspective on how to pray by Pete Greig in these current changed circumstances when our life is not so busy, when we're more concerned about the need for prayer because we see the circumstances around us demanding it. I would encourage you to continue in the other practices, and in the meantime, between now and the next time we communicate, be blessed and stay safe and keep pressing into God.